It's the Bradfield Weather Podcast, underwritten by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a family-run business built for you, and by McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail. I am Dan Lovallo. He is meteorologist Bradfield. We are putting this podcast together on Friday, March the 7th. And Brad, I know we want to take a look at the end of winter from the meteorological calendar standpoint, but before we do, I don't know about you, but it's been pretty windy where I am here in northwest Connecticut.
I woke up several times last night, Dan, with the screen shaking. I looked at Bradley. They had a gust to 46 miles per hour, but it seemed to me windier than that. I haven't had a chance to look totally at all of the obs and so forth, but I did see many places gusting between 45 and 50 overnight last night. So I don't know what the peak gust was, but my goodness, yeah, there was plenty of wind. That's the cold air coming in. And we've got a pretty cold weekend coming up, Dan, with temperatures seasonable to a little bit below seasonable for the upcoming weekend. And I got to tell you, that's good news, because I heard from my buddy Tyler Jankowski, who's the chief meteorologist now up in Burlington, Vermont. And he said that the warmth has been causing a lot of, obviously melting of the snow in the ski areas. And one thing they do up in northern Vermont is they always measure the snow at the stake, they call it, atop of Mount Mansfield. And earlier this week, there was 102 inches of snow measured at the stake atop Mount Mansfield. And it's the first time in many years that the snow depth on the ground exceeded 100 inches. So there's plenty of moisture there in the snowpack that, as the temperatures get warmer, like they've been the last several days, to release a lot of that moisture into the rivers and stuff. And for example, the Mad River in Vermont was in flood with big ice chunks going down the river and so forth. So this colder weather will slow that down and allow some of this to run off before we get more melting coming up next week. But yeah, over the weekend, especially up in Vermont, it will be cold with sub-freezing temperatures overnight and just barely above freezing during the day. So there's not going to be a heck of a lot of melting this upcoming weekend. Next week is a different matter.
Now, there are power outages, and I would like to remind people, it doesn't matter the time of day, the time of year, because they can go to bradfieldweather.com, and at the top of the website, there are links to Eversource and to United Illuminating, and you could click on those links and find out in your area if there are power outages. So go to bradfieldweather.com, where those links are at the top of the website. And I'm sure there'll be some more power outages over the next few hours because of this wind velocity. But that said,
yeah,
Brad,
Dan, wind advisory
right
up today through the day. And I just saw a picture from Granby, my old hometown, where Wells Road is closed in Granby because a telephone pole is like leaning precariously at a 45-degree angle across the road. And I saw, it must be trash day, I saw all these trash cans knocked over. That was quite a shot up the road there of trash cans knocked over and the phone pole leaning precariously across the street. So just an example of what this wind has been doing.
So now, as we said, we are putting this podcast together on the 6th of March, 2025, and there are still a couple of more weeks left of winter. But there's also a meteorological calendar. And Brad, you and I have talked about this before, but winter ended on that calendar March the 1st, and spring has started. And I know you have some numbers on what winter looked like. What do you have?
Right, Dan. The astronomical winter, when the winter solstice occurs and then the vernal equinox in the spring occurs, They're on odd days, like the winter solstice is like December 22nd or whatever, and the vernal equinox is around March 21st, 22nd. It varies, but the thing about that is it's much more difficult to average pieces of the month. So for expediency, what the meteorological community does is they say December, January, and February are winter. March, April, May are spring. June, July, August are summer. So meteorological winter, where you can just average the whole month, was just concluded on February 28th. So anyway, Dan, I did review meteorological winter and found out that, it was close to average in terms of temperature. I looked at December, we were around a degree above average. I looked at January, we were within a degree of average. I looked at February, we were within a degree of average. But because we had the consistent cold, we had a quote unquote New England winter in terms of temperature. We had thick ice. Like I saw a post from what is it, Candlewood Lake, that the ice depth had reached like 14 to 18 inches, Dan, and they were able to drive vehicles out
Yep.
onto the lake. I saw a truck out on the lake where they were doing ice fishing and so forth. Now, with the recent mild temperatures, I don't know what the condition of the lake is now, but that's the point. That we had the consistent cold weather over the course of the winter. We had those sub-zero days in late January. We had a temperature range over the meteorological winter, Dan, from 64 was the highest we reached. That was on December 11th, to 6 below at January 22nd. These readings were from Bradley. So, I mean, it might have been colder than 6 below at your place in Torrington. I remember you telling me one morning it was 7 below.
Right.
But those were the readings out of Bradley, Dan. Now, while it was cold, I was telling you it seemed to be the winter of unrealized potential. We had potential so many times, but it never really came to fruition. Nothing huge ever came to fruition. And what I mean by huge is a snowstorm of, say, a foot or more. There was potential a number of times, but it never panned out. In the month of December, we had 4.8 inches of snow total. That was all. And then in January, we had 5.6 inches of snow additional. That was all. February was the quote unquote snowy month for us. We had 11.3 inches of snow. So when you tally those 3 months up, it came out to 21.7 inches of snow, as opposed to what's normal for that 3-month period, which is 44.2. Now, it seemed snowier than that. Why is that? I looked back and found out why. Snow cover is measured on a daily basis at Bradley, whereas they go out at 7 in the morning and measure. It might not have snowed for 2 weeks, but they still go out there and they measure. And the days that there was a depth of 1 inch or more of snow on ground surfaces that are undisturbed, that means no one's walked on them, no cars have driven over it, it has not been shoveled or plowed. That is considered an undisturbed surface. The days that there was 1 inch or more of snow out there, you look out the window and your grass is all covered with snow, happened 5 times in December, 10 times in January. But listen to this one, Dan. 24 times in February. So you add that all up, that comes to 39 days. We Connecticut residents woke up, looked outside, and the ground was covered with snow. So that is nearly, what is that, 5 to 6 weeks.
Right.
If we get 3 more days of snow cover, and we might, it's still early in March, and we've got March and early April to go. If that does occur, we would end up with 6 weeks of not perpetual, but 6 weeks of snow cover over the season. So, that's quite a lot. You think about it, and sometimes we get a big storm, and then 2 or 3 days later, the temperature shoots up to 50, and it melts, and it's gone. But to have snow cover for 6 weeks, that's quite a lot for the Hartford metro. The Northwest Hills get it, obviously, a lot more than like the Hartford metro gets it. But that's why I think it seemed like a colder and a snowier winter than it really was.
Well, it's indicative of how cold the temperatures were. We would go days without the temperature going above freezing, even when we were in that period when the normal temperature should be above freezing, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. And I think the only reason that we the temperatures averaged out close to normal instead of below normal is we would get that freakish storm that would cut to our west, and all of a sudden, the temperature all day is and this is a pet peeve I have, okay, Dan? Say for 22 hours out of the 24 hours in a day, the temperature jams at 30. 30, 30, 30, 30, 30. Then all of a sudden the warm front comes in, and for 2 hours the temperature shoots up to 50. Now, if you averaged it out over the whole day and you took 22 hours worth of 30 and 2 hours worth of 50, that result would be a lot different than the way they do it. The way the National Weather Service does it is if you have it 30 for 22 hours, then it shoots up to 50 for 1 hour. They say the low for the day was 30, the high for the day was 50, the average is 40. That's not really right, but that's how they do it. And I'm not saying anybody's lying or fudging numbers or anything, but there's that old quote that figures lie and liars figure. You can kind of make things come out any way you want to do it. But to me, if it's 30 the whole day and it shoots up to 50 for 1 hour, that day should be recorded as, like, say, an average of 32 or 33, not an average of 40. So there's a huge discrepancy there, and I'm not sure that with the power of a computer now to be able to process things instantaneously, I don't think it's a big hardship to do it over a 24-hour period each and every hour. Then do it over, like, say, this was the high for the day, this was the low, therefore it's average. So say that 50-degree reading occurs at 11 p.m. at night, and then it goes past midnight, and then 1 a.m. in the morning, it's still 50, but then the cold front comes through and the temperature crashes down. Again, maybe it doesn't get out of the 30s the whole day or the 20s, but again, the high temperature is officially recorded as 50 because for 1 hour it was 50. And I think it kind of just skews the readings. That's just one man's opinion.
Hey, I hear you. Now, it's March, so that means March Madness, but you have Model Madness. It's as if these weather models have joined in on March Madness, and you've got some interesting facts behind Model Madness.
Yeah, this just gives you an example, Dan, of what we face as meteorologists, right? I looked at the models this morning, and my jaw dropped because I mean, you try to make a forecast that's accurate for people, and the models that you're using are like on different planets. And let me just describe to you what I'm talking about. So what's today, Dan? Is it March 7th
March
or it's
7th.
March
Yep.
7th today? Friday, March 7th. You look at the European, and for the next let's go out the next week. I looked at the 1 o'clock in the afternoon temperature. Today, 39. Tomorrow, 37. All of a sudden, that 1 p.m. temperature changes to 2 p.m. on Sunday. You know why?
Right.
This is the weekend of we spring forward.
Yep.
We transition from Eastern Standard Time to Eastern Daylight Time. So we spring the clocks forward this upcoming weekend. So now the 1 p.m. becomes 2 p.m. on Sunday. 43. Monday, 50. Tuesday, 57. Wednesday, 55. Thursday, 68. So, Dan, I'm looking at the European model first and I go, oh my goodness, spring has sprung. I've got great news to deliver when I talk to Dan and the folks this morning on the podcast. Then I switched over and looked at the GFS. And this is what you meant about your model madness, Dan. The GFS at the time that the European has it 55 on Wednesday and 68 on Thursday, at the exact same time, the GFS has 1 to 3 inches of snow for northern and western Connecticut. So it's like, we'll see when we get there. But because this is the winter of unrealized potential, I'm going with the Euro. I'm going with the Euro.
Right.
I'm going to say spring has sprung, and we're going to have some nice milder temperatures next week.
Well, you've got high school baseball practice, so you would embrace that kind of weather, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. We've got I think next Saturday we start. Saturday, March 15th.
There you go.
So yeah, I want spring to get sprung. Absolutely. And I'll tell you, as a coach, I hate practicing in the gym. It's almost impossible to practice baseball in a gym. So I can't wait to get outside.
Well, on that note, and again, we're putting this podcast together on March the 7th. What does it look like on our On the Weather Map segment?
All right, Dan, here's what I have for you. We've got a second cold front that'll be coming through around about dark tonight. So in that 6 o'clock hour or something like that. And that's the reason the winds are going to be up all day today. But that front. Now, earlier this week, I told you again our theme of unrealized potential. Dan and I were texting back and forth earlier in the week, and I said to Dan, "Wow, one of the models again. This was the GFS. It seems to be the snowy model that never comes to fruition, but the GFS was predicting a nor'easter for Sunday." And I said to Dan, "Ooh, let's do the podcast Friday because we might have a big snowstorm." Well, it does look like there'll be a low pressure system this evening in southern Illinois that'll move to Chesapeake Bay, and then it will move from Chesapeake Bay out to sea, straight out to sea on Saturday morning. So that, again, is the unrealized potential moving out. So instead of getting a snowstorm this weekend, we've got high pressure over Western Virginia with that storm threat going out to sea. So high over West Virginia. We're on the cold side of it through the day on Saturday. So, pretty chilly today. I'd say 38 to 44. Oh, by the way, Dan, the normal highs today on March 7th is 44. So if we stay 44 or less today, we're slightly below average. If we stay 44 or less tomorrow, we're slightly below average. So we've had some wild fluctuations in temperature so far in the month of March. But it looks coolish this weekend. Now, by Tuesday morning, we're going to see a low pressure, a big storm just north of Lake Superior, so up into southern Canada. But a warm front will extend from that through the Great Lakes to southern New Jersey. Now, that's Tuesday morning. Now, where that warm front goes is the big question. And obviously, the European takes that warm front through Connecticut because the European has 55 on Wednesday and 68 on Thursday. So guess what side of the front we're on with the European?
Well, we're on the warm side.
Yeah, but then the front is south of us on the GFS. So we're on the cold side. So right now, I'm being the coward and saying, okay, that stationary front is right through Connecticut. So, I'm playing the middle.
Well, it's like picking the over or under in a football game.
Yeah. Or oh my God. Or watching my poor Bruins.
Oh, forget it.
Oh my God, Dan, I am so distraught. Wow. They have in the last 10 games. They have lost 7 games by 1 goal.
Yeah.
I mean,
hurts. Yeah.
And they've done it with their 2 best defensemen out and their captain out.
Yeah.
And they're just trying their butts off and coming up short. And last night, as a grown man of 68 years old, I almost broke down in tears. Did you see what happened with 18 seconds left?
No, I didn't. What happened?
Well, there was a goal by Carolina. It was 2-2 with 1:30 left, and Carolina got a goal. And immediately Sacco protested. He said they were offside. They called it back, and they said offside. They washed out the goal. And I said, oh, good, now we're going to get a point because we're 3 points out of a playoff spot. Yeah. I said, all we have to do is kill it off for the next minute and a half, and we get a point here. With 18 seconds left, Zadorov has the puck in front of Korpisalo, in front of our net, and he goes to clear it. His stick breaks.
Oh my goodness! Oh,
he has to discard his stick. The Carolina player picks it up right in front of Korpisalo, shoots and scores.
Wow!
So it's 3-2 with less than 18 seconds left. Obviously, we go on to lose, get no points.
Yeah, that's a tough loss.
It was just a heartbreaking loss.
That is a tough loss right there. Whoa!
But anyway, on to baseball season. I'm looking forward to my Red Sox.
There you go. And hopefully for your Red Sox, it's not a season of unrealized potential because they really are a much improved team this year and should be among the contenders in the American League East, I think.
Dan, it seems it. And, I defer to you on anything to do with sports, but, I want you to plug your sports page here and try to drum up some support from our weather observers to yours. So go ahead, give out your Dan Lovallo sports stuff.
Well, I invite people to go to sportscasterdan.com where I publish a newsletter. I publish a newsletter every Tuesday, but I also publish on the platform every day, either a podcast or commentary of some kind, written or video. But go to sportscasterdan.com and subscribe. It's as simple as that. And, speaking of that, 4 weeks from today, the Hartford Yard Goats open the season, and I'll be there broadcasting with Jeff Dooley, and that's on the 4th of April, 7:10 start at Duncan Park.
And, Dan, I want to tell the folks, too, on Nesson and Nesson Plus, you will be broadcasting some 50 games this year. So if you're flicking through the channels and you happen to see someone you think looks like Dan Lovallo there, it is Dan Lovallo.
Yeah, we're looking.
So congrats on that, Dan.
Thanks. We're really looking forward to that. Well, that said, here we are, the 7th of March. and baseball is not that far away. What does our immediate forecast look like?
All right, windy today, Dan. A wind advisory is in effect. We've got gusts between 45 and 50 miles per hour. We had those gusts overnight tonight, but it's still windy throughout the day today. Sunny, some cumulus clouds out there, but a pretty day. But it's windy and it's chilly, 38 to 44. For tonight, increasing clouds. That's the unrealized potential of the weekend going out to sea as we see just some clouds tonight, 28 to 34. Saturday, sunny, 38 to 44 degrees. Granby Little League has assessments tomorrow outside in the cold, Dan. It's going to be chilly for the kids out there tomorrow, so dress warmly. Sunday, sunshine, temperature seasonable, getting up into the 40s. Monday, mostly sunny in the 50s. And Dan, I'm going to call Tuesday sunny near 60. And Wednesday, increasing clouds near 60. We'll see exactly where that storm in the Great Lakes goes. If it goes by to our south, the GFS is right. Could be rain mixed with snow. If it goes by to our north, spring has sprung.
Okay, and on that note, Brad, because we and you don't foresee any big storms down the road, and March, of course, has produced some of the most historic snowstorms in Connecticut history, but you don't foresee anything down the road. So we're going to kind of pause the podcast for the season. We do this on a seasonal basis because of the weather, because of the snow. And if something big comes up the month of March or even beyond that, then we'll have a special edition of the podcast. But I know you want to, and I want to thank our underwriters again for doing a fabulous job and helping to make this podcast possible.
I ran into Kevin Blake last night, Dan. Just a great friend and has been for years. And the same thing with the McAllens, the nicest people you'd ever want to meet. So if you can help any of their businesses, the McAllen Construction or Action Carpet, please do. And please mention Brad and Dan when you see them. Say, I got your name from the Bradfield Weather Podcast, and thank you for sponsoring it and so forth. But Dan, I want to tell the folks that they can get the forecast every day at bradfieldweather.com. Every day. Doesn't matter if it's April 25th or August 3rd or whatever. Dan and I put it out there every day. And as Dan said, if another snowstorm threatens or if a severe outbreak threatens or a hurricane threatens, we, of course, will come up with a podcast and keep you informed. But until next winter. And Dan, I got to tell you, and you know this, and I appreciate you not bringing it up so I don't get too upset. But tonight and tomorrow, we are burying one of my very best friends. And I know you thought the world of him too, Dan, as a professional. And it's Tom Monahan, who is the political correspondent at NBC Connecticut. And he gave me the honor when he retired in 2010 of being the person on TV who gives him the send-off. And believe it or not, Dan, I quoted The Wizard of Oz, but my quote for Tom was, "A heart is not judged by how much you love, but how much you are loved by others." And he was like a big brother to me, and I will miss him dearly.
Our hearts and prayers go out to Tom's family, and rest in peace, Tom Monahan, a great guy. And I know you and
Thank
he
you, Dan.
were very close, for sure. Brad, one other final note. We want to thank John Ramsey from WAPJ. Of course, he's kind enough to put our podcasts on his radio station. And again, if something comes up, we'll obviously have a podcast at any time, whether it's a snowstorm or a hurricane or whatever. but usually we go on pause when there's an extended period of uneventful weather, if you
Right.
will.
So, Dan, thanks to everybody, and thanks to John. Appreciate that very much.
For sure.
And thanks. I didn't think I'd get so choked up
Yeah,
because it's been a few days that I've known Tom's passed away.
Right.
But I have to speak at the wake tonight. I'm going to have to toughen up a little bit here.
Well, good luck.
Thank you, Dan.
And God bless. That's going to do it for our podcast. And to you, Brad, and Sandy, and our podcast and radio audiences, thank you and be well.
Thank you, Dan. To you and Susan, and we'll stay in touch this summer. And good luck with the yard goats.
Thank you. The Bradfield Weather Podcast has been underwritten by McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail. And by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a family-run business built for you. Be well, everybody.